been well documented, my feelings on what happened that day of the final, when I actually walked into the changing room and Madiba stood there wearing a springbok on his heart. That was an incredibly emotional moment for me in my life, and I just couldn't sing our anthem because I was just too emotional. I was so proud to be a South African. And when we walked out of the stadium, the sounds of Madiba, Nelson, 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 reverberating around that stadium was just it's very powerful. In the end, we were fortunate enough to win the Rugby World Cup. When Madiba handed the trophy to me, I shook his hand and he said to me, "Thank you for what you've done for South Africa." I said to him, "No, Madiba, you've got it wrong. Thank you for what you've done for South Africa." And I felt like hugging him. I really felt like giving him a big hug, but it wasn't protocol. I thought, this is it's not protocol, and that just gave me shivers down my spine. To be able to receive the Holy Grail in rugby from such an amazing person, and being able to lift that in front of a nation.
One of the greatest moments of my life was when Madiba put on an HIV positive t-shirt. It's one of the greatest moments of my life. I think it's supposed to see it somewhere.
Well, of all the moments in my life as a musician, that was one of the most powerful moments I've ever experienced, because when I wrote the song in 1986, I had no way of ever knowing that 12 years later, in another country, I would sing the song and the man I wrote it for would come on stage with me and sing it with me without me knowing, because we were ambushed. He just came on stage. It wasn't a planned thing or anything. He just walked on. It was an amazing moment.
Well, our meeting, I would say that there are many wonderful moments before, when I visited Johannesburg and when he visited Durban, when we met before, long before he got into trouble. And I can remember many wonderful moments too, that took place, many things that one will never forget. But I think that our meeting also in Durban on the 29th of January 1991, after it was almost a year after his release, was something I'll never forget, because shortly after he was released, because that Mr. de Klerk announcing his release, stated that it was I, Mangosuthu Buthelezi, who actually influenced him to release him. He said so in Parliament.
He caught me off guard once. It was a presidential sports awards, and actually most of us were seated and had arrived, and I noticed the seat next to me was empty, but never looked at the name tag, so I didn't pay attention to it. And then he came and sat down next to me, and which I was amazed that I was seated next to Madiba, and obviously quite nervous. And as the evening proceeded, one of the entertainers was singing a song that was his favorite, and all of a sudden he just tapped me on the shoulder. Everybody was seated. He tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Penny, let's dance." And he got up, and obviously I had to get up and dance with Madiba, but it was quite a moment, obviously, to recall again.
I think when he came here the first time, when I saw him with my own eyes swing a lot of cynical, critical people who had been propagandized into feeling this guy had horns, this guy was a terrible man coming out of jail. He went around the office here, and whether they were people from Afrikaans backgrounds or right-wing backgrounds or liberal backgrounds, they all came to me and said, "What a wonderful man." He just completely won them over in a half an hour going around. And he did it in such a charming, warm way.
I think it will still date back to the first pair of soccer boots he gave me. And there will never be anything that replaces that, My first pair of soccer boots, Patrick's, that I had, and he had sent them from prison. And that's the best gift I've ever had from him as a child, a grandchild.
Well, his inauguration as president, of course, when he said never, never, never again will we go through this. In that ceremony, there were the VIPs on the higher ground of Union buildings, and watching screens, thousands upon thousands of people before, and helicopters with a new flag flew, and then all of a sudden from over the hills, jets emerged and did a salute with, and then pulled up, and there was this terrific noise as they raised themselves up. And the people below shouted out, "Viva the South African Air Force, viva." That was a very impressive thing for me, because here was an instrument of oppression being accepted as their own by the people's representatives as a whole. For me, that was a moment which told more than any speeches or anything else, that change was there to stay.
I am an African with an open heart and a rainbow-colored skin, and I fit in 'cause I live under African stars.